everyone. Welcome in to our first Point Made mock draft. Point Made basketball has been going on for a couple years. Started with me and Liam here. Added a couple more people, but it's good to finally get some, video content running for y'all. At Point Made, we really like to do a lot of that fantasy basketball, but we're based on kind of that NBA draft mindset. So kind of incorporating a little bit of that here. We're gonna do a live draft, mock draft. So a little bit of both because we really want to, stress ourselves out for no reason. But I'm Josh from Point Made. This is my brother over here, Liam. How you doing, Liam?
Good, good. How you doing, Josh?
Doing good, brother. It's good to see you. Good to be here with you. Um, as you can see, we're from totally different places. I'm over here in Alaska. My boy
Yeah.
Liam's over there in Australia. Liam, you want to do a little breakdown about yourself, brother?
My name's Liam, one of the co-founders of Point Made. I do a lot of scouting for the team. Um, and when it comes to sort of my draft evaluation process, sort of do equal fit of four sort of main components: skills, tools, character, and then how they fit with whatever team is going to end up selecting them. I think each are fairly equal importance when it comes to looking at how a draft process is going to turn out, and all of that has been weighed up when we're making these picks. And these picks are going to be made from like the perspective of us as GMs, if we were obviously GMs making the decision. So not so much based on what we think or like any intel that we may have seen. I also think floor and ceiling is really important when you're looking at especially the top of a draft. There are some of the guys that are going to be picked a little bit later on in drafts that maybe have higher ceilings if they smooth out some of their rougher edges. But when you're looking at the floor of those players, you don't want to be taking an Anthony Bennett or something with your top pick and have them not pan out. So how do you weigh that? Comes in heavily for me with my draft process.
100%. Definitely my time knowing Liam, man, like your opinion on this, all your perspective, all that stuff super meaningful to me. It's definitely helped me refine my own process. I think my evaluation process is kind of one of those things that's like ever changing, kind of refine it from draft to draft, kind of get a little bit better at it. But I'm definitely looking at a lot of different categories, their perimeter, and interior scoring. Always looking at it from a positional standpoint too. So your ball handling, like if you've seen me, if you've seen some of my big boards, I love those jumbo ball handlers. Those big guys with the ability to
Yeah,
kind of
yeah, we
create
do.
that fluidity and everything. It's
I
kind of
think
like a
both of us have a
reflection.
bit of a soft spot.
Exactly. I think it's a reflection of just how the NBA is trending in terms of size and having that skill to go along with size. But definitely take a big look at motor, all that stuff too. Like you said, character, I think is a huge point, but it's a lot harder for us as scouts just watching film to kind of gauge character.
Hmm.
So I put a lot of weight on terms of skill set, so like their interior offensive skill set, their ability to create ball handle and everything like that. But like I said, terms of doing that kind of positionally, right? Because more often than not, those guards are going to have a more refined handle than those big men that we're working with, talking about. And just like I said, it's a ever-changing process. So like working with Liam, talking to Liam, he's kind of helped me like be more open-minded to taking on those older players or, evaluating those open players and not just putting that refined ceiling on them. That's kind of like what put me on to like Jaime Jaquez Jr. Last year. And that made me really high on him. But beforehand, like a few years ago, I was like, oh, he's older. He doesn't have the same ceiling. He doesn't have that same, upside as this guy. So I think we really help balance each other out in terms of our mindset. But like Liam said here, we're gonna alternate through the first round of the draft, and kind of just take picks from our standpoint, but doing so with our own evaluation processes. So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be high pressure. We're gonna get 90 seconds a pick. The moment a pick is in, we'll have some time to kind of explain our process, but the clock will start for the next guy. So it's gonna be an ongoing thing, gonna be rapid fire if it takes a little bit longer, or if it's too much time, we're gonna cut the time down to 60 seconds. So we're gonna kind of go by feel. It's our first video, so appreciate y'all jumping in with us, giving us a chance, and it's gonna be fun. So we're gonna start off with Liam here, with the first overall pick. Let's get our stuff together, and then we're gonna start it.
Ready to go, I think. I've pretty much got top selection same in every draft scenario that I've done so far. So with the first overall pick, the Atlanta Hawks are gonna take Alex Sarr. I just think that in terms of who's in this draft, there probably isn't a generational player in this draft, or at least not one that you could easily identify just from scouting. And you never know what's going to happen down the line. It's not like anyone knew that Giannis was going to be Giannis. But I think that Star's combination of physical profile, his length, his ability to switch out on the perimeter and defend and move in space, just makes him a defensive weapon in a way that no other player in this draft really is. And that's what makes him my top selection.
Definitely agree with there. I think with Sar, he kind of brings a little bit of that those flashes that you love to see from a big man, and the flashes
Yeah.
that you kind of fall in love with, but like in a regular draft class, right? He'd be one of those guys like in the 5 to 6 pick range that you're comfortable to take a
Five to
risk on,
six,
or
yeah.
you like yeah jump into. Like there's a few guys, I think 3 or 4 guys last year that I'd comfortably would pick ahead of him. But in this draft class, one of the more flat drafts that I've scouted since getting into
Hmm.
this. I think Sar does have that rare upside that kind of makes him like almost a consensus #1 overall pick, like across just the draft evaluation process.
I do think the floor of Saw is possibly a little bit lower than if you were to take someone like a Klingon at one, but I don't know if you get the same upside swing. And for me, I don't know if I could commit to a Klingon at one when you could take Saar and hope that his shooting comes around and he's able to defend in space a little bit better and he can be an actual versatile defensive weapon on that end of the floor.
Exactly. Like coming into the NBA day one, you're right. Klingon's got that higher floor, the ability to contribute more
He's
from day
ready to
one.
go.
Yeah, but with Sar, if he could put a little bit of those tools together, it's gonna be tough, man. He's gonna be tough. So that is actually the end of my timer. Number two, um, where are we at? The Washington Wizards are gonna go ahead and select Matas Buzelis. That's my guy. You know that's been my guy. He's
Hmm.
#1 on my draft board. He's been that way almost throughout the entire draft process. So I think just kind of looking at what Washington has done, it kind of lines up with what Washington has liked with their guys, right? They traded up for Bilal last year, one of those
Hmm.
bigger guys with the flashes of ball handling. I think Buzelis, a lot of people have been kind of tough on him. But I think when you factor in what Ignite looked like last year, the amount of pressure they put on their young guys, both Buzelis and Harden and Holland, they were put in a position where they weren't made to succeed. And a lot of that offense, especially early on, was centered around Holland rather than Buzelis, who was coming into the year injured. I think just factoring in like the flashes of the ball handling that he has, it's just insane. Like that he's not consistently talked about as one of the top guys of this draft class to me. I could talk about him at length for a prolonged period of time, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
I yeah, I'm with you on Buzelis. I think that when you have that combination of skill set and size and the ability to handle at the size that he is, uh, you just can't be overlooked. I think we saw it a little bit with Paolo. I'm not saying he's on the same level as Paolo in any way, but Paolo was a guy that I was obviously very high on throughout the entire process. And when there was talks of Jabari or even Chet going at one, it wasn't something that I particularly wanted to hear, just because I believe that that skill set of being that size, with that kind of handle, and he actually has a history of being able to shoot the ball as well. He didn't do it so well this year, but that was it was a tough situation in Ignite, and I agree with you when you touched on that. I think that that hurt a couple of these prospects. Some of these guys like Modest and Ron Holland, who were slated to be at the top of this draft, a lot of people have them slipping, and I just don't know if I fall into that consensus. Looking at the way that Ignite was just a mess this year, a mess to the point where it's not even going to continue next year. So I think we need to reel back on how low we got on some of those high profile wings that we were really high on coming into the year and a lot of people have dropped off of.
Yeah, 100% agree there. And I think like you're touching on, right, that jumbo ball handling style that he has, that's kind of similar to Paolo Banchero. To me, he really evokes shades of Jalen Johnson. I've talked about it on Twitter here a little bit, but just the ability to kind of create his own shot there, do a little bit of connective playmaking. Actually, like going into the year, I thought he'd be a little bit of a better playmaker. when Holland was out, they kind of featured him a little bit more in that Ignite offense. So I still think there's a little bit more to deep dig into there. But I don't want to spend too much time on it. I'll talk about it a little bit later. Pass it on to you with the third overall pick.
So with the third overall pick, we have Houston, right? Yep. Houston via Brooklyn. So it's a tough blow for Brooklyn too, not having that top three pick. For them, I think I'm just gonna go with Reed Shepherd. I think that Houston needs shooting. They need toughness. They need some more winning, and they've got all the pieces to sort of start, a quality lineup. And they maybe don't need somebody to come in and fill a hole. But what they do need is someone who can come in and shoot the ball because they shot about 36%, I believe, on jump shots from 3-point line last season. And while there was lots of promising stuff happening in Houston under that kind of held them back a little bit. So just having Reed to come in off the bench, to shoot, play solid defense, and then also looking at his statistical profile, just the way that he's advanced stats darling. Obviously, they love him. And you never know with those guys. Like sometimes it's hard to project those guys. They're almost a bit, you don't want to say Steph Curry, but a bit like a Steph Curry in the way of like he really dominated college. And are we just overlooking him based on his physical profile? If so, that could be a mistake. And that's why I have him right up the top there. And I think that Houston would do well to select him and capitalize on his shooting and hope he can turn into something special.
I agree here, man. Like with their roster composition right now, and just to be able to slot Shepard in with his shooting, put him alongside these huge guys, Amen Thompson, Jabari Smith Jr., bunch of versatile dudes, Tari Eason, to help kind of compensate for his like weaknesses in terms of his lateral mobility and everything. Even though he has these amazing defensive, instincts and just ability to read and really make an impact on both ends of the floor. But that shooting is really going to go hand in hand with what makes him successful over there. Because to be able to kind of create space for Amen Thompson to go to work and to also be able to complement Amen Thompson with his size, I think that's a perfect pick there. And I think that's going to be one of those picks like, I don't know, but he's my number like 8 guy. So it's not a huge reach anyways. I know you have him a little bit higher than me, but I love the pick personally.
I do have him a little bit higher than that. But even if I didn't, I imagine that this draft is sort of flat enough that picking for fit is going to be something that comes into play a lot for me here. I think that fit's going to really matter. I think it does in a lot of drafts. You want to get guys who you can put in a position to succeed. And I think the guys have failed before because they weren't put in a position to succeed. So I think anytime you can do that, that's big. I'd be willing to take a couple reaches on that.
For sure. And if anyone can help him kind of compensate for his like defensive weaknesses is
Hmm.
Ime Udoka and that defense, the schemes that he can draw up to
Absolutely,
kind of help,
absolutely.
minimize those limitations are going to be nuts. But transitioning over here to the fourth overall pick, San Antonio Spurs kind of put me in a tough spot here, but I go with a Zachary Ricochet. There's a kind of rumors of, the Spurs wanted to trade up for him anyways, but I never buy those early draft. I mean, like we talked about, Jabari Smith Jr. for the long time was pegged in like chalk, right? He's going to be the number one overall pick up to draft day, right? But you never take those things. You always got to, be a little wary when it comes to those draft rumors. But in terms of fit, I really like Ricochet right next to Wemby over at the 3 or 4 position, play alongside Jeremy Sohan. Of course, like, with the Spurs, they kind of want that point guard. But I feel like with the amount of point guards remaining, knowing that the Spurs have another pick here in 4 spots, I feel like they're in a good position to kind of take the highest guy left on the board here, who's Ricochet. He's not the biggest, highest ceiling type dude here in the draft for me. He's kind of one of those lower floor guys. I mean, lower ceiling, higher floor guys to me, kind of like that elite blue guy level, like Jabari Smith Jr. was to me in a couple of drafts ago. Kind of liken him to Jabari and Trey Murphy, in terms of what he offers at a team is just that third scorer who you could rely on consistently, be able to space the floor. He's not like an amazing athlete, but there's film of him, finishing above the rim as a slasher off alley oops and just being able to play alongside and create space for Wemby as a low impact, low usage player is like key to me if that's going to be your, offensive, cornerstone to build around. But yeah,
Oh, for sure. I love the Zachary pick. I contemplated it with Houston. I just thought that the high level shooting was a little bit more important for them than getting another wing in there. But love Zach. I agree with you that he's a little bit in that Jabari Smith mode where maybe you're not drafting him, looking at him to be a star, but you are looking at him as a star defensive, star role player who can really help elevate guys around him just by being a play finisher and being somebody who defends night in and night out. It's always good. I think we'd swing right over to pick number 5. Okay. So Detroit. I'd probably have gone Reed here as well, another team that just solely needs shooting. Um, and again, Ricochet would have been. You've left me with minimal options here to help
the
Detroit.
the honestly, this is such a tough position with Detroit, but just kind of factor in that that new hire they got, shot doctor, perfect
Mhm.
thing they needed. But
That's
with
true.
Detroit,
It's true.
Detroit could go so many different ways here in terms of what I would do versus what they you might do. It's really tough because there's like some high end talent guys, but then you kind of worry about how these guys are gonna mesh in
Uh,
with well, yeah, because Detroit has fallen into that trap already. Is like this is the best guy on the board. This is what they've done consistently, right? They'll take the best player available and then kind of see what they can figure out from there. So hopefully
mhm.
going forward, they're able to kind of put these pieces together a little better.
That's sort of where I'm at with Detroit is that I'm not going to make a selection for them that is just prioritizing talent over fit. I think that it's fine that they did it a few times, but they're at a point now where they need to start making these pieces fit together. With that in mind, I think I'm going to take Cody Williams here. Um, he's raw. He's very raw. He's got a long way to go. I think that Detroit, weirdly, with the way that they finished in the season, they finished with one of the worst records ever. They're actually more stocked up on talent than most teams that have finished in that position, and they can afford to bring Cody Williams along a little slowly, get his shooting sorted out. Not that it's terribly actually shot a good efficiency in college, just not on high enough attempts to really make any major uh sort of end all be all theories off of that, whether he can be a high level shooter in the NBA. But he's 6'8", 6'9", long wingspan, smooth cutter to the hoop. He really gets there. He finishes easily. He's got a little bit of refinement to do in terms of his footwork and ways that he can get around bigger defenders once he gets to the rim. But the way that he's finishing, even without that stuff, he's going to be probably a high level slasher and hopefully a guy that can space it out as well, be a good shooter, complement the other guys with some complementary playmaking. And you never know, maybe he's got shades of his brother and he just improves year on year. I think his ceiling is probably one of the highest left in this draft at this stage, and they're taking a player who I believe is high on talent, but I think the fit is there also.
Personally, I love this pick. I love it. Cody's my seventh overall guy on my big board. He's like one of the highest dudes left in this the tier. I mean, there's another guy in a higher tier left, but in terms of fit, it wasn't a good fit anyways. But Cody, I feel I buy the shooting. I mean, it took a little bit of a dip post injury, and you got to factor in that he's playing in with a team with such high level players too. You got De Silva on that team, right? You got Simpson on that team, so there's a lot of high usage guys there too. And I think one of the biggest things with Cody was that he kind of took a step back. But on a team like Detroit, where there's so much talent, to be able to contribute at the level that he can contribute at on low usage, I think is key. It brings that shooting, I think that aspect that you talk about, but his finishing is key too. And you said as a smart cutter, playing with playmakers like Ivy and Cunningham, I think that really sets the tone in terms of, is the best player available at the best fit too. I think it's a win-win combo.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that uh, if it had just been the best talent available, I wouldn't have made that pick. But because I do think the fit is there, it's kind of a nice little bonus that the talent I think is right up there at the top of this draft at this stage too.
Facts. Agree. Agree. Moving on to number 6. I think this is a thing that I've touched on and mentioned to you and both on Twitter as well. Charlotte trading Miles Bridges and taking Ron Holland. I think ideal, that's probably like the most ideal option for Charlotte on draft day. Just being able to slot that in, take whatever assets they can get from a sign and trade, if not just letting him walk, but just kind of giving that maneuverability as a franchise to build around, LaMelo Ball. But Holland, his defensively, he's probably my favorite defensive prospect in this draft, but he also has really like insane flashes of playmaking for someone that won't be 19 until draft day. Incredibly young, incredibly gifted athletically, um, a motor, like one of the best motors in the draft too. His like defensive intensity is crazy. He's always like driving. I mean, the shooting is a huge concern, obviously, but when you're playing with a playmaker of like LaMelo's ability, that really helps, that learning curve. It helps lessen that learning curve, helps create the game, make it easier. It's not going to be like the same G League Ignite high pressure environment. So I really don't buy the rumors of Holland slipping. Personally, if he does slip, to me that's a mistake, and whoever does take him, in case he falls, is definitely gonna get a steal.
I'm not as in love with Holland as you are. I do like him though. I think that he's a very strong defensive prospect. I don't hate the shooting as much as obviously the numbers aren't great. They weren't well as bad as I was expecting. I expected him to almost be a worse shooter coming in. I kind of thought of him as a guy who was really just going to finish right at the rim and defend a lot and was just going to be a slasher. And he showed a little bit of shake and ability to hit, especially from the mid range. Which I thought was really impressive from Holland. I think that gives him a high ceiling. He's got a freaky wingspan. As you said, he goes hard defensively. He's not my favorite defensive prospect. I'd have to give that to Castle, who is also that's probably who I would have taken here. I think he's a great fit, but I can't fault the pick at all. Really great pick on Holland here.
Facts. I know Castle to Charlotte's your dream. I just don't know if it's
It
gonna
is,
happen.
yeah.
It's your dream.
I don't think it'll happen, but I think it'd be so perfect for that organization. Um, Next pick. That's
Portland
where
at
we're at,
number
isn't it?
7. Yeah.
Yeah, Portland at 7. Um, Another one where it's a little bit tough because the top talent left on the board isn't exactly what they need, at least on my board.
All right.
I'm gonna take a swing here. I think I'm just gonna go Donovan Clingan here. I think that even
Ooh.
though they've got in place getting a guy who can just be the absolute backbone of a defense, really solidify their paint on both ends, has a lot of playmaking feel too out of those elbows, can maybe help Scoot get downhill off a couple of handoffs, something like that. Would be really big for their defense and offense, honestly. He's a great screen setter, giving Scoot somebody who can just body the guy that he needs to get by could really open up this Blazers offense. And I'd be interested to see what Chauncey does with the level of rim protector that Donovan is too.
I really like that. I like that. I've been watching a lot of Klingon film lately, and he's kind of reminding me of like prime Roy Hibbert, but in a modern NBA.
My
A little bit
my
as
comp for him at the moment is Warriors Bogut.
oh, Warriors Bogut
If he
would be
facilitates out of
absolutely
that
tough.
high post,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
tough. I like that. I like Warriors Bogut a lot because that facilitation out of the high post, I think, is what is getting him closer and closer to being
yeah,
that top 5 guy. He's my what I think he's my ninth guy overall. Because I'm really not sure like how usable he'll be. Definitely one of those guys like
I
drop
think it's
coverage, right?
interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting
Mhm.
pick.
I actually think that with Klingon, the more I watch him, I think that he can step out. I don't think that he's bound to being, Brook Lopez style drop where he just never comes up. I think
Right.
he's going to be a drop coverage big for sure. But I do think that he's got surprising lateral mobility at times, just being able to bridge a gap, step out, stop a guy for 1 second, and then get back. I think he can do that, and I think that
Mhm.
that'll be big for him in terms of living up to what some people have started to expect from him. For that said, I have him around where you do. He's 8 for me. I just thought the fit was interesting.
The fit is beautiful, and honestly, like if you're talking about getting a drop center big and you can match him with a high end point of attack defender, I think Scoot can be that. I think he has all the tools to be that if he just can, because that wingspan, that speed, everything. You put those guys together and you have a problem. And you're right. You set that tone defensively for the future. You lock that down if you can.
Yeah, yeah,
And that puts me exactly where I wanted to be as a Spurs fans. Thank me for
yeah.
this. You know who we're picking here? Stephon
I
Castle.
do, I do.
Lock him in at 8. He is my third overall guy, and this is exactly what I want the Spurs to do on a draft day. If if you get Ricochet, you pick him there, and then you're gonna get your choice of point guard at 8. Because at the end of the day, even if you don't get Castle, you're still gonna have Collier there, you're still gonna have Topic there. So you really put yourself in a position knowing that the guys ahead of you do not have the ability to, I mean, do not have the roster construction to take on another one of those point guards. But Castle, he's a stud. You know, like you said, defensively at the point of attack and just like all over the defense, he's a menace. But he has that size too. And I think what we talked about before he kind of specifically declared himself a point guard is his upside is tied to that point guard position.
Mm.
And that point guard position is wide open in San Antonio. And they have the ability to kind of give him that leniency to grow into that position. Even though I think he already has the tools to be successful, I think just giving him that spacing to work with, knowing that you could play 5 out if you need to, and he's gonna thrive because that shooting is gonna come along too. I mean, like even in high school, he had that upside of 3 level scoring, even if he hasn't put it together. But he kind of took a step back in college at UConn and willingly did so. So I feel like if you put the ball in his hands, he could kind of thrive a little bit more, get back to those flashes that he showed. But honestly, like if this is how the draft falls on draft day, I feel like the San Antonio would just lose their
Uh,
minds because they'd be insane.
if I'm the Spurs right now, I'm laughing. I love Castle. He's actually second on my board. I almost can't believe that he got to this point for me. But every time I look at the pick, it's what you're saying, where you don't really want to bring a guy in. Like if you bring in Castle to somewhere that already has an established point who's high usage, he's gonna have his role that he did in college, and that's fine. He's gonna be a very good, useful, long-term NBA player. But his upside is tied to giving him the ball, letting him see what he can do, trying to get him to be a more assertive scorer, to refine his shooting, to be that lead guard that he says he wants to be, and he's going to get to do that in San Antonio in this circumstance. And that's going to be really interesting to watch. I also think that it's just a broken pick in the sense that you're pairing him with Wembanyama, and then you have a perimeter defender to the level that Castle is, and you pair them with someone like Wembanyama, it's going to be impossible to score on the Spurs starting year one. That's crazy.
Exactly. And the schemes that Pop could drop them would just be nuts. And you're talking about like a team that already has promising wing defenders there too, and Sohan, Vassell. It'd be insane. And as a team, you put Ricochet on there too. My goodness, they'd be must watch. And like this, the Spurs already must watch basketball with Wemby there, but it'd be insane like how fast the climb would be back to being a playoff team. Just with the amount of talent in place. And just to be able to hand it back off to you now with Memphis at number 9 here.
Memphis at 9. This is a spot that I'm also going to find kind of tough. This is like where I would be picking Klingon if I hadn't already picked him. I think that's really who they'd be holding out for after they had Steven Adams depart last
I
season.
think one thing that I've always floated around in my mock drafts here is Washington trading back into the top 10, trading Kuzma to Memphis
Yeah,
for this ninth overall pick.
well, I didn't think we're not doing trades, but if we were, I'd have taken that trade for Memphis. I think that once Klingon's off the board, someone getting someone in like Kuzma would do a lot more for them. But with what is on the board, I think I'm gonna just take Dalton next. They just need wings who can contribute once Jar's healthy. They've got a lot of infrastructure there already. They could make a reach on one of these other center prospects, but I don't know if it's quite there for them to be selecting someone like Yves Messi in the top 10. I'd really be mocking a trade here if I could. But taking Dalton Neck gives them a solid shooter, a guy you know who can come in. He has the frame to defend. He maybe hasn't shown as much defense as you'd hope in college, but he was tasked with a lot of creation. And he's a lights out shooter, and he's a guy also who maybe has underrated athleticism. He was catching lobs at the rim all year in college. They really ran that for him a lot. My comp for him was a little bit like maybe a bit of a J.R. Smith, where you can rely on him to put up his shots. That's for sure. He's going to put them up. He's going to make probably a large percentage of them too. And then you can run all these sneaky little backup plays and cuts for him too, because he's got the athleticism. I think that alongside John Morant and Desmond Bain and everything that they've got brewing in Memphis is probably the clearest cut way for them to continue to improve and get back in the playoff race now they're healthy.
Yeah, I think you're right, and this is a tough spot if Klingon's gone, but I feel with Klingon gone and knowing Memphis's timeline and what they've got going on, the infrastructure, like you've said, they already have in place, just putting those guys like Dalton around someone like John Moran, Desmond Bain, just really opens up your offense and really just makes life easier for both, Dalton and the stars you already have in place. Because a healthy Memphis is not the ninth worst team in the NBA. They're an amazing team. They have all the talent in the world. Just being able to put a guy day one, like you said, Dalton, he was carrying an insane workload at Tennessee offensively, which negatively impacted his ability, to play defense, right? When you're carrying that much weight and to be as efficient as he was with the workload he had was nuts. So just to be able to see him where he doesn't have to carry that workload, play along someone with the gravity of John Morant, it's going to be absolutely lights out over in Memphis if they get him there. So yeah, you're right. If you're not mocking trades, I think that's the best possible pick in that scenario.
It is a little bit tough without mocking trades. No way they'll do that because I would heavily think that they would probably make a trade if they were in that position on draft time. But yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with the net pick if this is where they find themselves and they can't find a trade.
Facts. And then putting me here with Utah, there's someone who I want to pick here. I just don't know if it's the right pick for Utah in terms of what they already have in place, knowing that they have Keontae George. So I'm gonna go ahead and go a different direction in terms of what I want. I think it's just more right for Utah. We're gonna go ahead and pick Topic here, Nikola Topic, who his rim pressure is insane. His ability to get to the rim and finish is insane. Obviously, it's unfortunate that he hurt his ACL, but I feel like with Utah's timeline, they've kind of been treading water in terms of fully committing to the rebuild or not. But Keontae George and Topic, I think, complement each other very well, rather than who I wanted to pick here, which is Dillingham, highest guy left on my board. I feel like Topic does a lot of that stuff that you love to see. He has that size that you want in these modern point guards, his ability to kind of control an offense. He's like a maestro in terms of like his ability to control, especially in the half court, ability to get to the rim, and then those wraparound passes he does is just nuts. Like his vision is nuts, and just to see like some of the guys
Mhm.
that they have in place already, Hendricks, Sensabaugh, who I hope has a bigger role next year, just to be able to kind of feed into those guys the spacing that they're going to have in place, and Lauri Markkanen is going to be great. So just be able to get a true point guard because Keontae George he did amazing, honestly, as a point guard. But I feel like they're going to move Sexton Keontae, good combo guard to be able to kind of create. I think in the modern NBAs, you want multiple guys who can create anyways, but having someone like Topic come in and just kind of be your true point guard is going to be nuts for them.
Yeah, I like the Topic trick there, especially when you're. I have Rob like you probably around a similar spot. He's fourth on my board currently. I like the creation. I agree with you. It'd be a bit of a weird redundancy in skill sets putting him next to Keontae, so taking a different creator in Topic is probably a better spot for them. He's got great rim pressure. His passing's obviously his elite talent, and they can afford a little bit to just bring him along a little bit slowly with the injury. They've got some pieces there. They've got some guys who can step up into bigger roles. I like the pick.
Now we're putting you into another tough position here. Chicago Bulls at 11.
Oh yeah, yeah. Chicago 11. They probably the worst situation currently in the NBA in the sense that they've got a lot of guys who are paid a lot of money on that team and they're not really going anywhere. I'm not going to look at their roster in terms of making this pick. I'm just going to take the highest upside available, in my opinion. And that's Rob Dillingham. Just absolute bona fide creator, lights out scorer. his quickness and shiftiness off the dribble is something that not a lot of guys have been able to ever do to the level that he was in college. He was coming off the bench. I remember he's like sharing the ball with so many different guys. For him to be as efficient and effective as he was alongside guys like Reed Shepherd and all the other guys that they had there, it's just very impressive. And I think that he's maybe not the cleanest fit next to Kobe White. You can move Kobe over the two. He's 6'5". He's got a negative. He's got a neutral or negative wingspan. Either way, it's not anything impressive. It might be a little bit defensively challenged out there, but I think when you're in the spot that the Bulls are, just taking the best talent available is actually the move.
Nah, I 100% agree with you here. In terms of Chicago, I feel like they have a really messy timeline right now. And I feel like they need a little bit more clarity in the direction of where they should take their team. And, there's a talk about, oh, there's this mandate, we need to make the playoffs, etc. I feel like making the playoffs and just being that team that gets eliminated in the first round is not where you want to be anyways. Being in purgatory, I think, is worse than, being a lottery team. Because at least in the lottery, you could hit on a talent and that could bring you up, raise your ceiling. Because you don't want to be that low ceiling high floor team that's just in and out of the playoffs over and over again. That's what Chicago has been. So they need a change. And Dillingham and Kobe White, like you touched on, Dillingham being able to have the impact he did, the ability to create and be as explosive as he did alongside someone like Reed kind of makes you optimistic about his ability to kind of work alongside someone like Kobe White as well going forward. And Kobe White took a huge step, but I don't think that dissuades you from taking to someone that as high as Rob Dillingham in terms of being that good of a prospect, just passing on up to him. Facts. I'm gonna go over to OKC at 12 here, and this is a pick I really like. I'm actually really glad I'm in this position here because I really wanted to talk about this fit. Kyle Filipowski over here, OKC. I think one of the biggest things that you kind of highlighted in the playoffs with OKC is that lack of shooting, but at the same time, the ability to play five out when they had their guys there. But to be able to play five out with Filipowski and Chet on there to kind of mitigate, the size differentials. Chet as a rim protector is still nuts. But I think Filipowski kind of offers a lot of the things that OKC really values in their players. But that's kind of talking about a little bit of a really poor man's Miami, Chris Bosh, and his ability to kind of create for himself in the high post and the low post, while also still being able to defend at a high level and also still being able to stretch the floor for the team while being able to play both the four and five. So it kind of has that versatility that OKC really loves. He has the ability to kind of create almost 3 assists a game, being able to stretch the floor 35, 34% from three as a sophomore. And I think that's a really good fit alongside with him and Chet long term. Uh, Kind of curious to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Oh no, I like that pick. It's maybe a little bit of a different direction than I would have gone personally, but you said it makes a lot of sense. I like your reasoning. Um, I think like with the way that OKC wants to build their offense, Filipowski makes a lot of sense. He's a guy who can pass, he can shoot, he can defend a little bit in spots. That may be his problem area, but when you're next to Chat again, it's not the biggest concern. I like him as a bit of a he reminds me a little bit of Larry Markkinen. Probably the only player in the league that I could look at and go pretty directly one for one. I could look at Filipowski and Markkinen and go that's a role that Filipowski could play, kind of an oversized wing more than he is a straight up typical power forward or big. And I think that suits the way that OKC wants to keep making this really modern new style offense that they're doing.
Yeah, you're right. I think he really does offer a lot what OKC values in their
Mhm.
players, the ability to kind of connect the ball from that post, but also the ability to kind of play, on the wing as well, despite his size and everything.
Mhm.
He has really good ball handling, really good control of the ball too for his size. I love that, so can't help can't help
Yeah,
but
for
pass on.
sure. So I'm gonna go 13 Sacramento. This is a pick I made a few times when doing various draft exercises for Sacramento. I'm gonna take Deron Holmes. I probably wouldn't take him as high for many other teams, but the fit with Deron Holmes and Sabonis, I think he can basically be everything that Aaron Gordon has been for Nikola Jokic. He's just athletic. He can have an impact with rim protection. He's showed a little bit more shooting in the last couple seasons, um, which I think that fits too. But just more interested in his ability to be the lob threat on that team, to be someone who plays some versatile defense and helps out rim protecting and grabbing the rebounds. Because as good as Sabonis is, he's in that Jokic mold. He's a little bit of a baby Jokic where he's got some limitations defensively. And that's, as we've seen, you can win a title like that. It's not the end of the world. But surrounding him with the right pieces is going to be important. And I think Deron Holmes here is that right piece.
Yeah, I remember in our conversations you mentioned Deron to Sacramento, and off jump I was like, hmm. And then you kind of mentioned Deron being that Aaron Gordon. I was like, oh no, that makes perfect sense. Because honestly, Deron, I love him too. He's one of those guys. I think where do I have him? He's my 20th guy. So it's not a huge reach, especially in a flatter draft. But in terms of fit
Mhm.
and knowing what Sacramento's going for and knowing that they want to contend, and for better for better or worse, they're tied to
Mhm.
Sabonis
Mhm.
going forward, right? So being able to find someone that complements Sabonis and to kind of play off if you're going to put Jamal Murray in that role, similar to kind of, I mean, the Aaron Fox in a role similar to what Jamal Murray was. Obviously, he's not the shooter that Jamal Murray is, but being able to slot in someone like Deron Holmes, I think that's amazing as a person to kind of complement and kind of help alleviate some of Sabonis's weaknesses there.
I think it's so tough to build around certain archetypes of players that you have to be open to making that reach. There's a little bit of reach on my board too, but I just think that when you're trying to put around the pieces that you need around a guy like Sabonis, it's just invaluable to get a guy who can play at that four and still have a bit of the impact of a five, being able to protect the rim and kind of cover for Sabonis in ways where he struggles and let Sabonis blossom and play make and do all the crazy great things that we love watching Sabonis do.
Exactly. It'd just be fun to see them operate together because Holmes is such a fun player to watch. Honestly, I mean, that Kings team when they're rolling, man, it should be fun. Hopefully, they're able to kind of keep that core together, bring Monk along because he's crucial to what they were doing.
Absolute spark plug for them.
And Trailblazers over here at 14. Honestly, this is probably ideal for them. Tijan Saloon here, that sweet shooting big wing to kind of help open up the floor for their guys that they already have in place. I do think Simon's not going to be there long term. I know that hurts our boy Evan, another one of our point made guys. He loves the Inferno, but I feel like having Sharp as that two long term to kind of complement what Scoot offers at the one, and then bringing on someone like Tijan Saloon over to kind of play that three as that big. I mean, he's that wing but he's one of those wings that's so raw, but the things that he flashes are just so amazing. You know what I mean? Like he's that big three-level scoring flashes. That's a label that you love to throw around, right? Like three-level scoring. Well, like what does that even mean? But he
Mhm.
has all the tools to be that. But if even without that, he has that, that perimeter shooting aspect, that 3 and D floor that is really valuable to put alongside someone with the rim
Mhm.
pressure, like Scoot Henderson.
I think the interesting thing with that, like, if you were to tell me that one guy in this draft who wasn't selected right at the top, at least in our draft, was the best player from this draft, I'd probably look at to Jen Saloon. Just the combination of his measurements and his athleticism, how fluid he is at his size. He feels like one of those guys who just has limitless potential. Whether he gets there or not, I can't say it, but I love the pick for the upside. I think it's a great pick for Portland. I think they'd be so happy with that.
One
I'd be really excited to see what he would do if he was picked there.
100%. And if there's a team that has that timeline to kind of make sure he's not rushed along and he's able to hit his ceiling, it's Portland, right? Like they're in no rush right now. They have such a young core in terms of the guys that they're trying to develop that even if you have guys like, Robert
Hmm.
Williams, who I think won't be there long term, Aiton, if they play Klingon, he's not gonna be there long term either, but we'll see.
Okay, we'll move over to 15 for Miami now. I think there's a few guys still actually left on the board that Miami would have a lot of interest in. I'm just kind of trying to toss up two guys right now. I think just for me personally, I feel like a lot of other people would go Devin Carter here, and that's the other guy I'm thinking of. I think for me personally, I'm just a little bit higher on Jared McCain. Um, I think that he can come in, really be a solid piece for them straight away in a way that's how they like to draft. They like to draft guys that can come in right away and do stuff in their rotation. I think Eric Spoelstra's always had a way with shooters too. You know, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. He's always gotten the best out of his shooters. McCain is definitely that. He's a high volume shooter. He's a guy who can defend as well, and that's gonna be something that's important to this Heat team. I think he can. Obviously, he's not like a stopper, but he can defend in spots. He's a good team defender. He doesn't tend to float too many assignments. I think he's got the character that they look for. I think he's a high character guy, which is why he's ended up shooting up my draft board quite a lot. At the end of the process, I watched a few interviews with him, and he just very well spoken young man, really impressive. I think he's been really well with Eric Spoelstra in the Heat.
I love this spot for McCain, honestly. And if you want to sell this to Heat fans, just call him a rich man's Gabe Vincent. He does everything that Gabe Vincent could do and more. His defense is insane, especially at the point of attack. Kind of pair that with someone like Bam and some of the wing defenders that they already have in place. Even though, you know, his size is a concern, but he's not a true point guard either. That's another concern. But he has that connective passing. I think he did say in some of his interviews that he wanted more of that point guard role. He kind of deferred it a little bit over in Duke. So I think there's a little bit more passing there that hasn't been shown. Because when he has had opportunities, he's done incredibly well as a passer, as a creator for others. But you're right in terms of what he offers from day one. His shooting is insane. He's one of the better shooters in this draft. And just the fit is perfect over there for Miami for me.
Yeah, he did sort of say in a couple of interviews that he thinks he was not given as much opportunity to handle the ball, which makes sense with the personnel they had out there. And he thinks he could do a little more of that in the NBA. And if you buy into that, he's got some untapped potential that he could really tap into and make this pick a bit of a.
That transitions over here to me, my boys, the Sixers. Honestly, a really tough spot. My dream pick, I think you know, for the Sixers is picking up Filipowski. It's kind of be our spot center and someone that can also
Mhm.
play alongside my boy. So that kind of puts me in a spot where I take two guys, three guys I really like here. I'll just throw them out. Devin Carter, really like Furphy here, just in case we don't retain someone like Heel just for his spacing. And then some guy that you kind of talked me into, you've kind of made me go back and look at the film, Khalil Ware here. So just knowing that our biggest weakness is just kind of wanting to get a steady center and that knowing that Paul Reed might be someone that we have to let go because of his non-guaranteed contract just for that extra money. I think picking Ware here would be kind of fun. I feel like he has that athleticism, that ability to kind of play multiple positions. He's kind of a modern big and that he has that floor spacing too. So as a big that we want to bring on, I definitely want someone that can play alongside Embiid in spurts. But at the same time, to kind of be able to take that center position and knowing that Nick Nurse and his ability to kind of utilize these guys in versatile ways, I think Ware does have that versatility. I think that would kind of thrive in this position, kind of help us from day one because he kind of has that day one ability to kind of rebound, defend at a high level with his athleticism at multiple positions. So gonna go ahead and take L Ware here. Definitely excited to hear what's your thoughts on that. Knowing that I hated Ware about a month ago.
Yeah, yeah, that I just shocked me a little bit. You also stole my next pick. That was gonna be my pick for my Lakers, so you stole it for your team too. Crazy. No, I quite like Khalil. I think that he's got a really interesting skill set. I remember I had a conversation with you about him, and you weren't so high on him. So good to see that you come around on my guy. I think that he's got a really interesting mix of being sort of a classic post up big, but with the tools and the skills to expand on that. I kind of recently, it's only a very recent thing, I started to throw around a little bit of a baby DeMarcus Cousins um, comp for him, just because he does have a bit of that passing. he's actually got a really decent passing feel out of that high post, kind of like we were talking about with Klingon. And he showed an ability to step out and hit some jump shots from near the college 3 point line too, even at the college 3 point line a couple. I think there's some upside there with both the shooting and the passing that could turn him into a true versatile big. And I don't think that he's a guy either that you need to set and drop coverage. So I love that pick. I love Khalil, and you definitely stole my next pick, which is for the Lakers here.
I'll buy you
So
some time
if we
here.
get straight
So
into that,
yeah, I can circle back. I'll buy
you
you
can
some
buy me
time
some
here.
time. Go,
Yeah,
go.
I'll buy you some time. I definitely love that you brought up his passing touch because another reason I really like Ware here for the Sixers is that he can really replicate what Embiid does. Because I think one of the harsh realities of rooting for the Sixers is understanding that we are always unlucky, and that we are never, gonna go a season without some type of weird freaky injury. And just managing Embiid is the best way for kind of like that long-term success. So being able to have someone whose skill set with his passing really replicates what Embiid can do in an offensive scheme, I think really makes it a lot easier to kind of use that first round pick on Ware and just keep it moving and figure out what we can do in terms of free agency.
Yeah, no, I love that pick. I think it's a great pick. I think that you're totally right in that he could step in, and obviously no one is going to be Embiid for you guys that you're picking out of this draft. He can't step into Embiid's shoes, but he can do some of the things. He replicates some of the skill set, and that would help. Just ease the transition whenever Embiid's not in the game or not around. So it's 17 for the Lakers. You you made it tough on me here. I think I'm gonna go with Johnny Furphy. Maybe a bit of a home pick, being an Aussie kid, but I like Furphy's skill set. I think that he's a guy who can step in, make an impact in a rotation right away. And for a team like the Lakers, who has obviously finite amount of time with LeBron James around, and even you're trying to manage Anthony Davis and Davis's body, you don't know when it's going to break down. Getting a guy who I think can come in and just play right away in Furphy is important. He's a big wing, 6'8"-ish. He's not got a positive wingspan or anything, but he can body up with some of the league's wings, and he plays hard on both ends, and he's just a versatile Swiss Army knife. He does a little bit of everything. And I think that if he bulks up his frame and really focuses on accentuating some of his skill sets, like I think that he's a fine shooter, but he's going to need to dial in on being an even better one at the next level to fulfill the role that he needs to fill. He's a guy who can just get in, do whatever the team needs. And I also think he has an upside attached to the flashes of playmaking that we've seen from him, even if it's just connective, and then his shooting touch. So I like him to step in right away and just contribute to this Lakers lineup.
Nah, I love that. Furphy's my guy too, and I kind of mentioned that as one of the guys that I'd love for Philly to take at 16. But his shooting, I think, is super projectable, but it is that size with the shooting that goes hand in hand, right? Because you can play two or three. You can even play the four, like you said, if he bulks up. So it gives that positional versatility, which is like incredibly important in the modern NBA. But it's tale as old as time, right? You surround LeBron with shooters, you pick up an excellent projectable shooter here in Furphy. That's all you need to do.
Sure. They gave him a couple of Grady Dick comps. I've seen that a few times. I don't hate it. I think he's a little rawer than Dick, but
You just find a way to work that in. Oh,
no, that's
yo.
ridiculous. I wouldn't do that.
Oh, now I'm over here in Orlando, who I wanted to take Furphy, of course, but um, I think Orlando, I think they've got to take Ives Messi here. Um, that I really want to bring in a little bit more shooting for Orlando. I 100% want them to kind of get that spacing just for Paolo to kind of be able to operate the way he does. I know that they've also kind of been wanting a little bit more of a true playmaking point guard. So you kind of look at Devin Carter, who I think is not a true point guard, but he's one of those combo guards, connected playmaking as well, two-way player. But I think Ives Messi brings in a lot of the interior defense and shot blocking that they've been really craving lately. They've been really been needing lately as well. And I think that's one of those key things that are kind of because they've been making strides. I think Jet I think he makes a big jump next year. He kind of slides in and kind of offers the spacing that they've been needing. You've seen a lot of improvements in terms of Paolo and Jalen Suggs is shooting as well. So I think they kind of maintain that trajectory. That'd be good to see. But you bring in Messi here, one of the biggest, most athletic centers kind of like available. His shot blocking is insane. And just to kind of be able to see him play alongside two other big guys like Franz and Paolo with their playmaking to be able to feed him off those lobs is going to be nuts.
Yeah, I think when we talk about spacing, sometimes we fall into the mistake, the habit of only thinking about 3-point spacing. And I like this pick for Orlando because he gives you more of the vertical spacing. And Paolo showed when he played alongside Mark Williams in college that he can use that. He can drive, he can draw guys, he can dish over the top. He's a true playmaker. So if you give him a guy who's a vertical lob threat, I think Paolo can make that work just as well as he can make a spaced out center work. And I do think that Wendell, he's been solid for them. He maybe doesn't have the size to really drive home how big this lineup is. If you get a guy in there like Missy, who's a proper big body, I think you start to feel the impact of having 6'10" guys at both your 3 and 4 and Paolo and Franz, and you really start to run over teams with their size. So I like that pick. I like the athleticism. They obviously need more shooting, but I think it's fine here to go with Missy and miss out on a little bit of shooting and maybe look to address that in free agency.
Agreed, agreed, especially with those rumors of play to Orlando. But use that bag while you got these guys on rookie contracts. Get a shooter to kind of make life easier for them. Pick up this feud over here to kind of fix your issues with the interior defense and just keep it pushing. Toronto Raptors. I hate the Raptors.
Toronto, this is a tough spot, honestly. There's so many things the Raptors could do. They're kind of in the middle of, if I call it a full rebuild, but it's definitely a retool. Getting rid of Pascal Siakam, they've clearly building around Scotty Barnes. Um, I'm gonna make a pick here. I think that you may end up not loving, but I've done it a few times. I still feel good about it. I'm gonna pick Tyler Smith here. You see, he's shaking head of there already. I actually I like Tyler Smith. I think that he falls in that category of G League Ignite guys that he maybe didn't get the smoothest area to play in, and he's a guy who's just like as he measures in the combine, he's shooting up people's bullets because the dude is massive. He's 6'11" with a 7'2" wingspan, 220, 230 pounds. He's got true center size, but with the skill set and defensive versatility to play the four. I think that's getting overlooked a little bit. I think that's a rare archetype that when we see it in a lot of other guys with the ability to shoot, the ability to block shots and come over and defend the rim, but also defend in space. He's even sneaky athletic. Like he gets up for some lobs. I really like his tools, his upside. I actually think that if everything was to go right for Tyler Smith, and I think that there's a lot that would need to go right, his defensive IQ is an issue. He maybe isn't the best playmaker. I think you'd be concerned if he was making multiple passes within your offense. But if everything was to hit for Tyler Smith, I think he's actually got one of the highest upsides in the class. I think that Toronto is in a position to look for that and to try and get that. I also think he gives them a really interesting look. Like you slot him in at your 4, you get put Barnes in at your 3. You've got a shooter and a big body. You're starting to overwhelm teams with size when you've got Poeltl at the 5. But you can also slide him up to that 5 position. I think he's got the size. I think he's got the skill set where he can do it at least in spurts, if not eventually maybe even full time if you wanted a shooter at your 5. And he can maybe impact a little bit of what have a bit of a similar impact of what Miles Turner does, where he's a little bit complementary at your 5, like spaces the other team out a little bit, but he's athletic enough to go roll to the rim too. I think he'd be a little bit of a budget Miles Turner if he was to really put together some of his defensive IQ and start being an impactful player on that end.
I think you'd be happy to hear that I've moved Tyler Smith up to 24 on my big board. So it's not egregious here. I actually really like the pick. I just knew you were gonna pick Tyler Smith because Tyler Smith's Toronto has been your like MO this whole draft lead up. So I just knew it was gonna
Every time I
happen.
get there, it just feels like, oh, it needs to happen. I don't know.
Facts. I was almost contemplating taking Tyler Smith at 18 First
I'd have
because
liked
of the
it.
shooting, but it also would have messed you up completely. And I know that would have been funny to watch. But
It would
other
have
than
definitely
that,
would have.
yeah,
Yeah.
I would have like, oh, I would have had to create more time for you again. But I think Tyler Smith to Toronto is ideal. Like you said, I think his upside, if he could play that small ball stretch five and they play five out with Scotty Barnes operating the ball, nuts. Absolutely disgusting. That offense would be crazy. But even as the stretch four, jumbo stretch four, I think that's kind of what you kept talking about. And I was like, let me look at this again. Am I giving him the same leeway that I was giving Holland and Buzelis, knowing that G League Ignite was a shit show, right? But knowing that, looking back at it, I was like, yeah, like in the modern NBA, his skill set is invaluable. Being able to bring in someone of his age, very young, with his shooting pedigree and his size, that combination is nuts. And I think at 19 is almost kind of a steal, right, for what Toronto's trying to create. And that's something that they value, that size and shooting combination. I think that's a really good pick. And that leaves me in a very tough spot here at 20 with Cleveland. I think if they're going to commit to their two big centers, their two guards, I think you take someone like Tristan Da Silva here, who's able to connect the floor. I think he has amazing size to be able to play the four, so he can play alongside both Mobley and Allen and Spurts, but he can also play the three with his spacing, his ability to shoot, his ability to create on the perimeter, his ability to kind of have that connective passing to play both alongside, Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, complement both of them. I think I think it's a good pick there. I think De Silva has that size that kind of helps compensate for their smaller-ish guards, but he also has the shooting to kind of help complement their two bigs to kind of create that, make it a more cohesive offense. Because you kind of see how invaluable adding shooting was to Cleveland in terms of helping them kind of turn the corner this year.
Oh yeah, for sure. I like that pick. I think that with Cleveland, they do just have so many directions that they could go. It can make it a little bit hard, but also a little bit fun to pick for them. I like Sylvan. I think that he fits in with what they want to do. I think that they've had trouble acquiring a guy of De Silva's caliber and sort of that mold of player that's just a big wing slash forward who can shoot, defend, really fits into and buys into a team concept. And if they want to continue to build with the team that they have now and move forward, I think that picking De Silva would be so great for that. Really help keep pushing them in the race, the playoff race for next year. Moving on to 21, got New Orleans. This is a spot where like I usually don't have trouble selecting for New Orleans when I do these draft exercises because there's usually a big who I could maybe project being a shooter that I can draft for them to fill what is about to be the void of Valanciunas. I assume I don't think he's going to be coming back in free agency. And that's just really not here. We've got Tyler Smith off the board. We've got Kyle Filipowski off the board. We've got DeJuan Holmes off the board and Khalil Ware. They just don't have that option here, which is what I would usually do. And I think I'm going to make what might be a bit of a reach. I don't know where you have this guy, but I'm going to take AJ Mitchell. I think AJ is a guy who is a true floor general, a guy who really sets up his team, puts them in positions to succeed. I think that's something that they've really lacked here with having CJ McCollum running the point and Brandon Ingram obviously filling in and running a lot of the point. Both those guys are totally competent ball handlers. They do great at running ball screens. But I think they've lacked a guy since getting rid of Lonzo who gets guys in their spots, who really makes sure that everyone's getting the touches that they need, who runs a team, gets the team into their sets. I think that's something that he can do and that he can come off ball as well when you want to give it to Zion and you want to give it to CJ McCollum. He's a versatile combo guard, but he is one who I think excels at setting the table and almost in a way that Lonzo did, where he's empowering guys to make plays rather than putting like spoon feeding them. I think AJ is a guy who does that really well. His mid range jump shot is money. I think that's something that's always going to help guys transition to the NBA. That shot's going to be there for him. And he's a bigger guard. He's 6'5", which fits along with what they want to do in New Orleans.
No, I love this pick. I actually have AJ Mitchell at 17, which is a little bit down from where I had him at my last big board. I had him actually all the way up at 13, but I had a few guys jump him. But AJ Mitchell here with all those bigs off the board, not wanting to reach for another big, I think is a great pick for New Orleans. Just knowing that they're gonna want to go more Zion centric going forward. I think he's definitely one of those guys that complements a Zion centric offense, whether or not like knowing that New Orleans, I think they still have needed a true floor general, and I think AJ Mitchell, while not a true classic point guard, has a lot of that playmaking that they've been craving, and I feel like he brings that along with high level shot making and creation as well. And like you said, the size that they love over there in New Orleans. So I think that's a really good pick. Me too. Phoenix. This might be
I didn't think
this
you'd
is
be a fan of that one.
now I actually really like AJ Mitchell. I think one of the this is where a pick I can go two ways here. And it might be really gross or really good, but just knowing the timeline of Phoenix, if I was their GM, with my evaluation process, I think I would go Devin Carter here. Just knowing the level of high level
Yeah.
playmaking that they have. Um, Devin Carter, I think, kind of fell a little bit here in this draft because there's a little bit of rumors of him being a lotto guy, and I think he is a lotto talent, especially in his ability to kind of contribute from day one on both ends of the floor with his playmaking on offense, obviously, but he's a playmaker on defense as well. He wreaks havoc on defense, and that's kind of what they need. He needs that. He brings a little bit of grit at that point of attack, a little bit of that switchability, that versatility, the ability to kind of keep the ball moving on offense. When you have guys like Devin Booker on your team, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant, you really want the ball to continue moving. And the other guy I wanted to take here was Isaiah Collier, but I think that they don't have the timeline to kind of make it successful for Collier. And I love him a lot. He's actually number like 11, so he's my highest ranked guy left. But I'm just kind of thinking on like what Phoenix has going on for them. I feel like Devin Carter is a better fit for their timeline and what they've got going on for them.
Yeah, I'm not much of a Collier guy, but when I try and slot him into this draft, like he's definitely in my range now. And he's really tough. There's just not many teams that need the unique skill set that he kind of provides. It's this, the downhill driver slasher and heavy playmaker who needs the usage. Early, yeah, I like your pick there. He dropped a little bit. In our draft, I do see him much higher in a lot of the drafts that I've done, but he is another guy who I think is, while he could fit on every roster, it's tough to find the spot that really needs what he provides off a punch where you would take them really high. A lot of teams have guards like that in place. I actually wanted to throw this comp at you for him. I wanted to see what you have to say about it because I thought of it recently. Everyone wants to comp all these high level role player sort of projected guards now to Derek White, and I think that's always a little bit ambitious. I think White's pretty special. You think of Melton for him. I think that severely changes the outlook of how you sort of look at him. If
I really like Melton. I feel like with the year that he had recently with us over at Philadelphia, I feel a lot of people are lower on Melton than what he offers as a high level, like, rotational guy for a playoff team. And I think that's kind of where I project Carter. He's like a spot starter, high level, like he's a really under
Mhm,
the radar glue guy that helps raise the floor from the guard
mhm.
position of your team, but he's like kind of crucial in helping you turn the corner. And I think his defensive intensity is kind of like what really sets the tone for what makes him invaluable as a player. And I think that's the same thing that goes hand in
Yeah.
hand with Melton. He has that passable shooting. I
Mhm,
don't think he's lights out in terms of like what Derek White has been. Derek White is an anomaly, right? So being able to kind of like tie
yeah.
something to what Derek White has done and like to be able to add Drew Holiday
I see
and
that
be
comp so
better,
much.
yeah, to be able to
Hmm.
add Drew Holiday and be more impactful, it just kind of speaks to how great Derek White has been, and it's been insane for him to continuously improve. But I think Carter, I think yeah, he's a little bit closer. He's a bigger DeAnthony Melton. I think he doesn't have, I think that wingspan's pretty similar though, right? Because DeAnthony Melton kind of has that
It
giant
is.
plus wingspan. He has a plus wingspan.
Melton has that
My
massive wingspan, and so does Carter.
mm,
Carter's got
yeah.
it's the other thing that sort of put me onto it.
Oh
He is
yeah,
a
he
little
does
bit
have
bigger.
a big. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
Carter's got a massive wingspan.
Forgot about that. Yeah, he has a massive wingspan. Yeah, he's big. He's a big boy. You know who my DeAnthony Melton is? I don't think we're drafting him in the first
Who?
round, but my D'Anthony Melton is Bronny James, but I don't want to get killed. So
It's a good. No, that's good. I like that.
yeah,
Probably can't. Yeah, I'm not gonna be mocking him in the first round, I don't think. But I like that comp for him. It's really decent. Maybe a little bit better of a
facts.
shooter than Melton, who kind of fits more with me with Carter as being like a little bit of a
Yeah,
spotty shooter at times, but he's passable.
spotty
I think
shooter
the
for sure.
form, one of the reasons I'm a little bit lower on Carter than some other people is I don't love the form. It goes in. It didn't
Yeah,
go in for a few years though in college,
you're
and he sort
right.
of righted it this year. I wonder if it's a little bit of an anomaly,
You're right.
just because that form, it's a bit of a two motion. It looks a little bit awkward.
Yeah, that's the thing with those guys that have those late year breakouts in their shooting. It's always a concern for me in terms of how projectable that is into the NBA, right? If you don't have that, I mean, he's had one of
Hmm.
those steadier jumps, but then he became that. Ooh, now you could trust his shooting here at that last year. So I don't know whether or not you buy that,
Yeah,
but I feel like regardless of the shooting, even if he's at like a average, slightly below average dude, everything else he offers makes him close to a lottery guy in this draft, and
for
that
sure,
might
for
just
sure.
be a testament to the level of this draft class, right?
It may be a little bit. And I do think he's a really good fit on Phoenix. I think that they need what he provides with his connected playmaking and defense. I think they lack that in their guard rotation right now, so I like the pick. If we
100%.
move on to Milwaukee, this is I've been mocking De Silva here every opportunity that I get. And obviously I'm not going to have the opportunity to do that this time. Just left me just a little bit lost. I think I'm going to do something a little bit crazy. I'm going to go with Zach Edey here. I think they've got the infrastructure already with Brooke Lopez. They know how to run drop coverage big. I think that's gonna be really big for Edey, is that whoever selects him needs to know how to utilize him. He's not gonna be a guy who you can just throw into any defensive scheme and have it work. You're gonna need to run drop coverage. But he's a massive human being standing at what, like 7'3" barefoot with a 7'11" wingspan. Absolutely
Hmm.
ridiculous measurements. And he dominated college. It's just about projecting how much of that is translatable to the NBA. And I think that's actually really hard to do with Edey. I think there's a world where we look back and we go, why did we overlook Edey? Why did we not think that he could do the same things he did in college and NBA level? It's not like he's gonna dwarf people any less. I mean, a little bit less, obviously. He's not gonna go going off at 6'8" at center and whatever on some nights. There's gonna have legitimate size and that is gonna have an impact. But he's still gonna dwarf most of the people that he ends up matching up against.
Hmm.
Absolutely massive human being, and he's got some really interesting touch around the basket. The only comp I think that you can really end up giving me is Yao. I think just that
Yeah.
massive size, but maybe the limited mobility. He's actually got decent touch from the mid range. I see a lot of Yao in his game, and it's gonna be interesting to see if you can get a Yao prototype to work in today's game. And I think if anyone can do it, I'm not going to place my faith in Doc Rivers, but I do think that a system and a team that has run has run drop coverage for a lot of years has a good. That's it's going to be about him staying on the floor defensively. If you can scheme to keep him on the floor defensively, I think Edie's going to be a high impact player.
100%. 100%. And with drop coverage being more and more commonplace, I think, Edie becomes a lot more, enticing because of what he offers offensively, right? It's not like he's some just he's very good at, his perimeter defense, right? He's very good with his shot blocking. He's good at with his timing. It's about having a point of attack defender that can help mitigate, his weaknesses on the perimeter and not be someone that, you just constantly attack and target because there has been times where you go into his chest at the in the paint too, and you can kind of take advantage of that. But as he's gotten stronger, he's
Sure.
gotten better with his timing. He's been able to mitigate that as well. So I think it's a good pick. You really mentioned in terms of having Brooke Lopez in place, being able to kind of make it work. But how much of that was with Drew Holiday? You know what I mean? Because we know
I was
Dame.
actually going to mention that
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Because
I was
without
going to
with
say,
Dame there, oh
is that what happened with them?
yeah. because knowing
They
that
lose
Drew
Drew Holiday
Holiday.
and they can't defend.
Exactly. And then with I mean Doc doesn't have the the best record of bringing the best out of people, but Edie, I think Edie alongside Giannis, insane. And I would love that to work. Um I watch Purdue a
It
lot
could
because
just
of
be
my
like a
boy.
force. They could be pummeling you over.
Insane, yeah. That would be a force for sure. And I think it'd be fun to watch, and I feel like more and more likely he's a top 20, top 25 guy come draft day. And I
Mm.
think if any place is going to be a good spot for him, it's a team that's already known how to work with a drop center, drop coverage big. That puts me in 24 with the New York Knicks. Completely destroyed my heart this playoffs. I think the Knicks here, Knicks, they can go a variety of ways with their guys. I mean, the Knicks with Julius Randle are very different than the Knicks that we've seen in the playoffs. And I feel like the way they operate as a team, they're a lot more fluid as a team without Randle there. So I'm not sure how involved he's going to be going forward, if that's a piece of the puzzle that they see long term or not. But I think just looking at that, they could just go so many different ways here. But I think one of the key things that they were missing was another secondary ball handler to kind of help alleviate the pressure when Jalen Brunson's not on that. So finally, I have a reason. I've convinced myself to draft my boy Isaiah Collier from USC. So with the
Well, it's good that
24th
you did
pick,
it because I
yep.
wasn't going to.
I know you weren't gonna do it, so I was like, let me just do this
I wasn't
now.
gonna do it.
Because Isaiah, we need to get you off the board, but you're my 11th ranked guy, bordering top 10. Like you should have been taken. I need to get you out of here before you end up at 30 and we get killed. But I definitely think that he has the ability to both play off Brunson as well too. Brunson, like we've seen in with Dallas, he could play with another usage heavy guy.
Mhm.
Obviously, with New York, you want the ball to run through Brunson, but to be able to have someone off the bench with the explosiveness and the versatility of Collier, who has also been able to play off ball as well at USC, even though he wasn't the most successful there, they had way too many guards at USC. So I feel like his you look at him through the same lens that you look at G League Ignite. It's a really poor roster construction, just put in a position where he wasn't able to be as successful as he could have been. So I feel like he's definitely one of the highest upside guys left. He's one of those guys that thrives off his rim pressure, his ability to kind of create off his penetration. And with the shooters that they have in place, I think that's a really good place for him to be successful is in New York.
I mean, you know my feelings about Collier at this point. He probably wouldn't be coming off if it's what I'm doing. If it's me doing what I'm doing, not projecting what other people are doing. He's probably not coming off the board in my first round. Honestly, that's going a bit overboard. Yeah, I think I have him around 25 or something. But I'm not a big Collier believer, and I think that he has a lot of avenues to success. Though I think that you're right in the sense that the upside is there. I'm very skeptical that he ends up connecting on that upside. But I think whenever you have a frame and he's not the highest level athlete, but he's got some athleticism to him. He's got some burst. You always, and he's a high usage guy. You always have that high ceiling to get to. I just see a lot of obstacles in the way to him getting there. And I wouldn't be making that bet, but I totally get it. I get the bet that you're making there on Collier. And he does make sense for the Knicks in the sense that they do need another guy who can step in and handle some usage, especially when Brunson's not on the court. Having Collier to come in and just sort of do his best Brunson impersonation, it might be enough to get them by and survive the few minutes that Tom Thibodeau lets Brunson rest in a game.
Can't wait to see who you draft next to complement Isaiah Collier. So that'd be hype.
Do you want to do same person drafts for the same team? Or is that something we were doing? Because Knicks are back to back here, aren't they?
I could just draft again. I don't know if we done that
It's
throughout
up to
this
you.
one.
Well, we did, but I think it just lined up that way with the Spurs.
Yeah, that's true.
If you have a vision that you'd like to execute here, I'd be happy to let you do it. I could take the next two picks.
Yeah, perfect. Let's get it. I think here, um, we just go with the next highest guy, which is I think one of the things that the Knicks, knowing that they're right there, they're knocking at the door, to be able to bring in someone to kind of help mitigate the risk that you take on by taking on someone like Collier. You take on someone with a high floor, being able to be a day one contributor, and that's Jalen Tyson here, Texas Tech Red Raiders. I really like what Jalen Tyson being able to kind of be that jack of trades type player. He kind of like Josh Hart in a sense that he can contribute in a variety of ways. He kind of has everything that Tom Thibodeau loves in a player: high energy, high motor, just locked in on defense every day. He has that versatility to play alongside that lineup with their small guard lineup, be able to slot in and help kind of spot. So Josh Hart doesn't have to play 46 minutes a night. I think he's able to kind of replicate that role very well. Has that same length and size to be able to play multiple positions, which they love as well. So I think being able to kind of take on that high risk, high upside guy at Collier, but balance that out with someone with such a high floor and being able to contribute from day one, like Tyson, would just kind of go hand in hand right there.
Yeah, I love that pick. Tyson, honestly, a guy who's dropped a little bit for me. I have him a little bit higher than this. Just couldn't just kept finding other things I ended up wanting to do. I could have totally taken him last pick for Milwaukee. I love the pick of Tyson. I think Tom Thibodeau would love having Jalen Tyson. He's a dog. He's 6'5". He's got a plus wingspan. He's got absolutely gigantic hands, and he shot the ball really well this last season and really scored for the Raiders just all over the court. He's a guy, like you said, who can contribute across multiple categories, but he also can be what this team needs in the sense that he can take on a little bit of secondary handling responsibility. He can fill up the bucket when Jalen Brunson needs a little bit of extra help, especially if we don't have a return of Randall in a prominent way to this New York offense. Getting Tyson in there as a wing creator who can absolutely catch fire, but also has a way to contribute as a role guy. I think that's a great pick. I love it. If we move on to Washington now, Washington is in a spot where they kind of can just take whoever they think the highest ceiling is at this stage and be pretty happy with that. They don't have a lot to fall back on. There's probably going to be a little bit of roster turnover too still for Washington. I doubt that Kuzma makes it through the next season with them, maybe 2 seasons, depending on whether they can find the deal, of course. But I think if they had the opportunity, they'd pretty happily move on from Kuzma and maybe a couple of other pieces.
Yeah, they probably move on from Poole too the moment they get a chance.
That might be harder for them to accomplish, but I bet they do it in a second if they were given the opportunity to. I think I'm going to take a swing on a guy who I don't love here, but I do think has a really high upside, Jacoby Walter. I think we've had a lot of discussions about Walter. We pretty much align on how we view him. He has this reputation of being a 3-and-D guy. I think we're both of the belief that he doesn't really have that reputation is not earned. He doesn't play hard on defense. He doesn't really try on defense. He looks lost a lot of the time. He doesn't have the weight really to body guys and stay in front. His defense is really why he isn't much higher for me. But he is a spark plug, and he's a guy who's going to be able to shoot it for sure. He's going to shoot it at least a reasonable level in the NBA, and he's a guy who has expressed a want to have more playmaking from interviews that I've seen of him. So he wants to handle the ball more, be more of a self shot creator. And if he's able to do stuff like that with his size, he's around 6'5", he's plus wingspan at 6'10". He's put on some weight, he's only like 200 pounds. But if he does a few of those things and he actually starts trying and locking in on defense, maybe smooths out some of the mental parts of that side of the ball. This guy could have as high, he would be going high lottery in this draft, and they're getting him here at what, 26? I think that's pretty good value, even if it's a guy who I don't love. And Washington for them as well. If they miss on this pick, they're going to have a lot more picks in the upcoming years and better drafts too. So if they're going to miss, this would be the draft to do it.
Facts. And if you're gonna miss, you take someone with the upside that Walter has. Because right there, we've had conversations
Hmm.
about like the rough edges of Walter, but he does have that. He has everything you want in a modern two guard. Right. He has that shot making profile. especially early in the season when he was flashing a lot of that off the dribble shot creation on the perimeter. That was nuts, and I feel like that contributed a lot to kind of where his draft stock is and how it's just kind of hovered in that range, right? Because that's something that you really want and you kind of crave in a draft that a lot of people haven't shown that perimeter shot making that Walter has, but being able to kind of refine
Hmm.
that a little and do so more consistently, because right, like he didn't show that. He didn't maintain that for the remainder of the season. And I think that's a good pick though for Washington. I think you're right in that with that late first, they could go a variety of ways, but going BPA, highest upside is definitely the route to go.
Hmm. I don't even know if I have him left. I have to look. I don't even think he's my BPA at the moment. Oh, you know what? You know what's crazy? He actually is.
Oh
He is
wow.
my BPA at the moment. Yeah.
I think
I think he's right in this area.
I have like four guys over him currently.
Yeah. So apparently I'm slightly higher than you, but we're both not much of Jacoby fans. My rating on him even being that high is based on the upside alone, really, rather than anything that
Mm-hmm.
he showed me this last year.
100%.
So next we're gonna go out to Minnesota. I'm gonna make a pick
Wow.
that you've seen me make before. You know what I'm doing here, I think. We're gonna
I
take
know
Tyler
exactly.
Kolek. Uh,
Yeah.
hmm.
That's why you're so willing to trade that New York pick, because I know you just wanted to talk about your boy
Oh
here.
yeah, not even joking. That factored in.
Yeah, I knew
Um,
it.
Kolek, I just think is a really high level two-way plays on both ends of the floor, initiator and playmaker. He's not maybe a guy I would take this high, not that it's super high even anymore, but in the first round for many teams. But I think he makes a lot of sense for Minnesota. I think a lot of their success has been predicated on having Mike Conley run the point for them as just a really solid point guard who knows how to get a team into an offense. All the things I talked about with AJ Mitchell, where he's maybe not making direct assists in ways that blow you away as often as some of these other point guards. But his ability to just orchestrate an offense, make everyone comfortable, get guys their touches, make sure that the offense is running smoothly, be a real coach on the floor. I think Kolek has all of that. And then to boot, I think he's got great skills. I think that he can shoot it from three. He's maybe not the pull-up shooter that Mike Conley is, and that might be a little bit of a adjustment point. It might be something he tries to add to his game. But once he gets into the mid range, he's as deadly as anybody. He's got a floater. If he was a little bit taller, I think he's a guy that a lot of people would have a lot higher, even with his advanced age in this draft. I really like Kolek. I think that he's going to be, if he gets drafted here, the perfect Mike Conley replacement.
I definitely agree with you here. I feel like with the pieces they have in place, having someone like Collick come in and be able to do that, that orchestration that you're talking about, be able to set the floor for Anthony Edwards, help them get into their sets, help set the floor for Cat, help run that, pick and roll and everything, just to kind of create that, get the defenses off balance so guys like Ant can go to work. I think is nuts being able to bring that in, especially at 27, being that high level playoff team they are, being able to come bring in that secondary backup point guard to kind of take over for Conley as he gets older. Like as you said, he's getting it to that stage where there's a couple years left only at most at the level that he's currently producing. So being able to come in someone from day one, take under his wing, and be able to kind of take over for him as he gets older, I think is huge. And I think Kolek, one of those my draft darlings as well. I think I got him right at this range at 28. This feels like a perfect slot for him, especially at Minnesota.
Mhm.
Going over to 28 with Denver, I think I'm gonna take my highest guy left. Denver, I think they're kind of, missing that Bruce Brown type player. They're kind of missing that player, that connective wing, that ability to kind of come in and help set the floor, kind of connect the offense over there, kind of hit shots. I think I'm gonna go with my guy here, Jurisic. Nikola Jurisic.
I knew.
I think the fit is great because he has the ability to kind of handle the ball, ability to kind of play off of Jokic, have that two-man game, kind of help alleviate. Because you see
Hmm.
what happened with Minnesota once they pressured Jamal Murray, that offense kind of fell apart. So being able to kind of bring in someone that can help alleviate that, take off that pressure, be able to handle and help them get into their sets while still having that size to operate on the wing and hit shots and everything, which is something that he's done a lot better this year. Do so more consistently,
Mhm.
scoring more consistently, be that kind of spark plug type player. They can play both on and off ball, which is something that's kind of a necessity when you have someone like Jokic, who his playmaking from the post is insane, something that we've like almost never seen before. So being able to hit shots while also being able to kind of help carry that offensive load, I think is huge. I think it's a great pick. I think they get a steal here. He's actually my 18th overall guy. He's hovered at 18, top 20, almost breaking the lottery for, almost this draft process, but it's definitely been a riser. I think it's a solid pickup here. I knew you knew what I was gonna go.
Obviously the Nikola connection, the Serbia connection. There's a lot of reasons that this pick's just a lot of fun. I also think that just literally from a basketball analysis standpoint, everything you said, perfect. He's gonna fit in that offense so well. He's a guy who can dribble, pass, shoot. I'm a little bit sketchier maybe on the shooting than you. I think that's why I've got him a little bit lower. This is right around where I have him. Like you've got him up at 18. This is his range definitely for me. And I think that you're like comparing him to Bruce Brown, just so perfect. He's a little bit taller, but the skill set's so similar, and the way that he could impact this Nuggets offense is really similar. And I think they are missing that guy. They're missing a bit of that short roll guy, that connective piece that I think Jurisic could definitely be for them. For the next pick, we're out in Utah, another team that has a lot of ways that could go with their picks because there's so much open in Utah. They do have a lot of talent out there, but not a lot of established talent. You don't know who is the core that you're going to put together and win with. I'm gonna go for a big swing for them. Maybe we've got Topic in there already. Um, I do think that putting someone who fits and can play alongside George is so important for Utah's future. I don't know if I personally view George as a full-time point guard handler. I'm just going to give him two cracks at it here by selecting Bob Carrington. I think that he is maybe again more of a bit of a more of a scorer, which is why it's nice that George does have that versatility where you could slot him in at the one or the two long term, and you could probably be okay. Um, and in getting Topic and Carrington, I think that's going to be a really nice long term guard rotation once they do move on from guys like Sexton and Clarkson. Having those three guys, I think, is a really nice complement of skill sets. And Carrington to me is a guy who has a really high upside in this class. I actually view him a lot like remember when Portland selected Anthony Simons, and it was like this guy, he's got all the talent, but he's a few years away. We're like, oh, okay, we're never gonna see this guy, and then all of a sudden you see Ant, and he's almost a star, right? He's borderline. I think Carrington could be a similar guy where it takes him a few years to get going. He's very rough around the edges, so rough that if I was judging him based on just what he showed, like he can score, and that's kind of if I was judging him based on that, he'd be a lot lower. He might not even be being drafted in this draft. But because I think that he has the tools. For example, he's got 6'8" wingspan. He's 6'4". He's tall. He's got all of the scoring down. If he just rounds out his game, which is again a lot of what Simons needed to do, he can end up in a really similar position where year 4 or something, you start looking at him and going, "Oh man, all this time we put into developing him was worth it." And if Topic, for whatever reason, the injuries, the negative wingspan, was reported 7 foot at one point and absolutely isn't, ends up holding back Topic, then you have Bob Carrington to fall back on. You slide George back over to the point guard, maybe, depending on how Carrington develops. And then you have these two electric scoring guards to really power your offense.
I really like that pick. Bub's one of those guys, not 19 until after draft day. Upside is insane, and upside in a draft like this is something you swing on as long as you have that risk tolerance. And I think Utah has that risk tolerance. This feels very much like an Ainge type pick, where he's very comfortable, especially later in the draft, taking those high risk guys and seeing what he can do in terms of development. And that's something that Utah's been very comfortable doing, giving a lot of G League time to their guys last year and Hendricks and Sensabaugh, giving the opportunity to kind of develop and come
Hmm.
into their own. And I feel like even if you take Topic, doubling down and taking someone like Bub feels good, especially because he has big size too, right? Both of them have big size. George is not that small either. So being able to play all three, you envision a place where you can play all three. And I think that Utah at 29 has the ability to go in multiple directions, right? Like you could look at Trenton Flowers here, right? You can look at Pacome Dadier here. Um, but I feel like Bub is he's that dude. He's a really good pick here at 29 in terms of, the upside left remaining on the board.
You mentioned like two of the guys that I was looking at this spot too. I really tossed them up. I think that there's a good argument for not going this way, but yeah, I also just think that when you can get that upside at this stage in the draft, when you can have that risk tolerance that Utah has, getting a guy that I think has a lot of upside is a good move for them here. And yeah, worst, I mean, you probably end up with electric scoring six man, which at this stage in the draft would be a major W.
Yeah, you get a six man at this stage in the draft. That's a dub. You get anyone that contributes at this level, especially in one of a flatter draft like this. It's pretty good. And I think come draft day, you're gonna really see a lot of sliding in terms of 20 to 40 is almost interchangeable in terms of like my ratings. Like the rating differential is so minuscule at this point. Like you can make an argument for different people. Like of course there's still different tiers going on, but the tier differential is not huge in my opinion. I actually have it as a tier four, tier 4.5. So there's a lot going back and forth. I think it's all about risk tolerance and timeline and fit at this point. You start prioritizing that more than anything. And Utah has a lot of that risk tolerance and a lot of that longer timeline to go with someone like Bub. And that transitioning to the freaking champions, the Boston Celtics. I'm gonna have to freaking refer to them that for the whole year. I'm so tired of them. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, now they have the
Mm-hmm.
luxury of selecting someone like Trenton Flowers with his three-level scoring upside, give him the ability to kind of develop for as long as he needs in the freaking G League over here at pick 30. I'd probably go either Dadier or Flowers, but I'm leaning Flowers just because I think Pacome Dadier has a little bit of that. Actually, I don't. I feel like I'm talking myself. I'm just gonna stick with Flowers before I skew, but Flowers has that size that you love, the ability to play multiple positions. Like what I talk about, one of those things you love to throw around is three-level scoring upside, but he has those flashes as well. And if you're gonna
Hmm.
have a team with the luxury of being able to stash someone with that level of upside on their G League team to be able to learn under wings like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, be able to compete against them every day in terms of practice, that's really gonna help accentuate his skill set and I think kind of really maximizes what this draft pick is. Because if you get someone like that with the level of upside that he has, and developing long term, I think it's huge.
Oh, for sure. I love that pick. Trendon Flowers, I think, is a guy who I have a little bit higher than this. But it's tough to find a landing spot for him. He's a guy who's going to take some time. He's a bit raw, but he has all the tools you'd want. He's a bigger guard slash wing. He's shown an ability to put on the floor and get to the rim. There's a handle up, but attacking a closeout, things like that. He's going to be able to contribute for you right away. And then he's shown a beautiful stroke. The way that he shoots the ball, like he's got one of those aesthetically pleasing forms. I watch him shoot. I'm just like, no, that dude can shoot. The numbers don't always completely back it up. He's not like he's a bad shooter by the numbers, but it's not like he's shooting lights out either. But when you watch him shoot, he just looks like somebody who can shoot. He passes that eye test for me. He didn't get a very big role um, in the NBL this year. And we didn't get to show off a lot of what he could do if he was in college or something and he was more of a featured option. I think Flowers might be higher up on people's boards. I think that he has all the requisite athleticism. He's got the size, the length, and he's got a little bit of that it factor that you don't see out of a lot of prospects where you look at him, we watch him play, and you just go, this guy's just a hooper. I really like that pick there. I think that they could have got themselves a steal, which hurts me to say about our NBA champion Boston Celtics, Me being
Oh
a
my
Lakers
goodness.
fan, you being a Sixers fan,
Oh
absolutely
my
stabbed
goodness.
us in the heart having to make what I think is a great pick for the now champion Celtics.
For sure, because by the time we release this video and then getting to draft day, I would not be surprised if Flowers ended up being a lottery dude. Because
I
like
agree.
we've said this like over and over again, in a flat draft, the level of upside that Flowers carries is rare. Size,
Hmm.
athleticism, you name it, shooting, scoring, upside, you name it. Even in that smaller role, the flashes, and then to be able to show out like he did at the combine and in the scrimmages. I really think he's definitely made
Hmm.
a name for himself and has definitely put himself like rocketing up those boards. I have him at 20. I had him at 19, so he's a top 20 dude to me. And it's tough, like being able to stave off some of those guys that are climbing, like Dadier, right? Like he's in my top 30 now as well
Yep.
because that combine. But I think that that's kind of a testament to really how much of a name he made for himself. Flowers has in the last month or so, and they have a lot more
Yeah.
insight than us, so I would not be surprised top 14, top 20 dude come draft day.
No, I totally agree. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come off the board in the lottery or just right after it, especially as teams you see a lot of shake up in the weeks leading up to the draft. I think that Trenton is one of those guys where a team just falls in love with him during workout. You could see him go at a crazy spot that you're not expecting.
Exactly. And with that, that wraps up round one.
Yeah.
Honestly, with the length of this video, it's probably going to be a two-parter right here. We're probably just going to be the conclusion of the
Hmm.
second part of the video. Gonna have it broken
Yep.
down to the 15 and then 16 to 30. So thank y'all for sticking with us, man. We really appreciate that. This was incredibly fun, Liam, to be
Thank
able to
you. Thank
talk
you.
draft with you. Honestly, we need to do this more
Yeah, it was awesome.
consistently. Yeah, so I think that's something that we'll definitely add
Hmm.
to the board, something that we can do consistently going forward. But honestly, incredibly fun. Really, even though this is one of those draft classes, I think that we both talked about is a lot more fun to scout these types of draft classes, right? Because
Hmm.
you really have to dig deep
It
and
is.
kind of look at and really take a look at all the film for these guys to figure out, what's going to hit or not. And one of these draft classes, like the amount of film that you evaluate or take time to consume is going to pay dividends going forward in terms of how successful your board is going to look, right, in the long term.
I think we're gonna see a lot of different boards this year. Like it feels like there's usually a fair bit of consensus around draft circles about who's gonna go where and how we all view these guys. And this year, it's felt like it's a bit of a free for all. Like you can turn to me and say something like Ryan Dunn lottery pick. I think you're a little bit crazy, but it- it's way more in range than it would be in other drafts with a guy like Dunn or just any other random name where you would pick them lower down the board and go, the tiers are just so flat that it's going to be really interesting to see where everyone has everyone ranked on draft night. It's going to be interesting to look back on. It's going to be a really interesting draft in general, and it has been in terms of evaluation because you do have to rely on your own evaluation a lot. You can't look at what the consensus is. You can't get a really good view of what other people think because everyone thinks different things. You got to really trust what your eyes tell you.
100%. And even using my guy, Buzelis, as an example, right? For me, like, there's no doubt in my mind this is the number one dude in this draft class, right? But then you can look at other guys and I can have conversation. Like, he's not even a top eight, top five, top seven dude on a lot of other boards. And it makes sense. Like, I could see where those concerns come in. But then I could also kind of see, like, why he's my guy or someone like Rob Dillingham, like you could see those concerns is like, oh, this is not a top 10 player. Look at his size, like historically, how much people have been successful at that size to be able to do what he's doing, right? But that's another dude that can make an argument. This is a top three guy in this draft. Like I wouldn't be surprised if Washington took him at two, right? Because he offers a lot of what they need, right? So it's like what we said at the beginning, what you said, explaining some of your draft picks. It's about picking to kind of fit your needs here. It's a lot more reasonable picking for fit and kind of how it meshes with your roster than it is in previous drafts because the tiers are a lot more blurry this year, right? They're not as defined, the lines between each players, the rankings. There's a lot more it's a lot closer than in previous drafts, I think. Especially if you kind of look at my board, I'll have my board somewhere. Y'all can see my prospect rankings. There's not a huge gap in terms of how I rate these players. And I think Liam's will be the same way. There's a lot of closeness among his tiers.
There is, yeah. There's the just so flat across tiers, and then even when you cross over into from one tier to another, sometimes the lines feel a little bit blurred. Like it doesn't feel like there's a large gap like there is in some drafts. It's been interesting to evaluate in that sense.
Exactly. Well, once again, thank y'all for sticking with us. Thank y'all for the support that we've had over the last couple of years. We've grown for having 21, like 12 followers on freaking Twitter. We're over here closing on 2,000. It's insane to us the amount of support and love we received from y'all. So, it's an honor. It's definitely a pleasure being able to produce content for you guys. And we look forward to doing it more often. Appreciate you guys.